Tonight we're going to delve into a tricky topic. It involves landowner rights and wildlife who don't seem to respect those rights. And then the steps taken to deal with that on the Oregon coast. The killing of hundreds of coastal elk. That is our big story tonight. In Clatsop County, some neighbors are angry after hunters killed actually dozens of elk over the last 2 years. The herd is beloved to some, a unique and majestic sight at the ocean. The hunting was legal, backed by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife. It's all part of a program that compensates landowners for damage. But neighbors question if this program's being used in the right way, and where's the line? Investigative reporter Evan Watson has our story.
On the Oregon coast, in the gated Surf Pines neighborhood, Ken Wiest has unusual house guests.
We love it. You know, my wife and I absolutely love watching them out in the backyard and watching them play out here. And it's, you know, it's not something you see everywhere.
Herds of elk that are used to people roam up and down the coast, often relaxing in Wiest's yard. Just south of Surf Pines, in Gearhart, Sarah Gage used to watch the elk walk past her beachside home, taking pictures.
It was magical for us.
But in the last few years, something changed.
And everybody noticed it, and everybody was in town was talking about what happened to the elk.
We weren't seeing any elk.
Wiest says he knows what happened. He woke up to the morning gunshots as hunters shot 77 elk in his neighborhood in just over 2 years.
Watch a mother get shot and watch how the babies cry for 3 or 4 days. It's heartbreaking at times. There really hasn't been anything concrete that I've heard that makes any sense about any of this.
The elk hunting in Surf Pines was legal, sanctioned by the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife as part of Oregon's landowner damage tag program. The state-managed program allows people to hunt elk on private property if the landowner shows property damage caused by the animals. But where is the line? Is the compensation program being used correctly or being abused? From the spring of 2021 to the spring of 2023, Surf Pines homeowners Craig and Dana Weston reported property damage to ODFW, ultimately receiving 80 tags for hunters to kill elk. Any person with a valid Oregon hunting license can use 1 damage tag per year. I spoke with Craig Weston on the phone multiple times. He explained that elk had damaged fences and ate the feed for horses that they board on their property. He declined an on-camera interview, but said he's not planning to apply for more damage tags, in part because of the backlash that he's received. And Weston's neighbors, like Jim Alberg, have their opinions.
You said this would have been like shooting fish in a barrel?
Yeah, big fish in a little barrel, yeah.
I mean, give the elk a chance, you know. Coming out here where there's a herd of 100 of them and getting on your knees and having your pick, that's not fair.
Joe Surmeyer hunted on the Weston's property. He took a friend, and they took the elk meat home to eat, share, or donate.
Oh, it was a great experience for me because I got to take a 90-year-old guy out there probably for his last one. Because after we were done, he said, "This is my last one." I think that did it.
How would you describe the need for a program like this?
I've hunted elk here for 40 years. There's more elk in town now than there is up in the hills. You can't eradicate them, that's not the point. The point is you got to suppress the herd. You got to get it down low enough.
On the northern Oregon coast, the elk damage tag program stretches well beyond Surf Pines. KGW requested public records on the damage tag program, showing who's using it and where. More than 600 elk tags were issued in Clatsop County alone over the last 3 years. Hundreds of different hunters reported successfully killing an elk, and 17 different landowners received at least a dozen tags.
I talked on the phone with other landowners. One explained to me that he's a farmer who lives near a wildlife refuge, and elk damages crops, and therefore his livelihood. He said he requests a few tags each year to use as a deterrent, and for him, it often works.
Paul Atwood is a wildlife biologist for ODFW. He makes site visits to approve damage tags, looking for tracks, scat, damage to fences and agriculture. ODFW issues up to 5 elk tags at a time, but there's no annual maximum.
It's using that as a tool to try to change elk behavior so they go somewhere else and aren't in a position where they're, continually causing conflict.
So in Surf Pines, what did you see to justify 80 tags in 3 years?
You're looking at that in hindsight, right? I don't think there's like a magic number there where it's like, this is what's okay and this is what isn't. I mean, I think you have to balance that with, the size of the population and the amount of damage.
So in that way, you'd issue 5 tags. Mm-hmm. Landowner would say there's still elk here. You'd issue 5 more tags. Still elk here, 5 more tags.
Yep.
That's kind of how it worked?
Kind of how it works, yeah.
Did at any point you say, hey, this is getting to be a lot of tags, or did it feel it was always necessary at that point to you?
It's pretty routine for us. Like, it really wasn't out of the realm of what other, properties that have big conflict.
There has been talk in the community about trespass fees, a way for landowners to charge hunters to shoot elk on their property. Elk meat is valuable, and trespass fees could turn damage tags into a profitable business. But Weston says he never charged anyone. Hunters say they didn't pay for access, and Atwood says ODFW would shut that down.
Are landowners allowed to sell tags to hunters?
No. I mean, the point of the program is to reduce damage and conflict on private land. It's not, and from my perspective, it's not to, allow a private landowner to make money off hunting.
And if you heard of that, what would you do?
Stop issuing tags.
Atwood says ODFW is running the program as the state legislature intended.
I think the idea that elk populations are in trouble in Clatsop Plains is just not true.
Neighbors like Alberg say they don't buy ODFW's explanation, feeling the state is too lenient in handing out tags.
They say strongly this is not a culling, but in effect, does it feel like that to you?
Yeah, it does. And I think it does to others too, just because of the number and the relative size of the herd.
Sarah Gage believes a one-size-fits-all model across the state doesn't work.
This damage tag program, do you think it was used too broadly?
In this case, it certainly was. I think there are places where it's appropriate. In this case, it was just severe overkill.
Evan's with me now. You mentioned culling in there like it's an important term. What does it mean and why is it important?
So culling would be the killing off of a herd or a group of animals in this case. Now, that distinction would be ODFW says this is not a culling because it was not state-sponsored effort like that. There was not community meetings. It wasn't targeted to eradicate a herd for a problem. This was in response to the damage and the damage tags, and ODFW has that latitude to decide how many and when those are given out. So there's a difference there. But people were frustrated, saying they felt that this was almost like that based on the numbers.
The numbers are pretty big, yeah. What's the long-term solution for this?
So there was a Oregon Solutions project from Governor Kate Brown, the Elk Collaborative, that had a lot of conversations the last few years about what do we do with elk in Clatsop Plains. And that was really interesting because they came up with a lot of maybe this, maybe that, a lot of community dialogue. We'd like to see these actions and these actions. Damage tags is one of them. But the community members, many of them I talked to are frustrated, saying this kind of overrode all of that, using damage tags to this degree. There's other things you can do, but when you ultimately end up killing dozens and dozens of elk, are the others then even worth it? And what were all those conversations worth? So ultimately, to answer your question, the transparency and the conversations, we need to have some kind of consensus here. There's still a lack of that from the community members I talked to on both sides, saying, hey, we haven't really come to much of an agreement of how to manage this problem.
And it sounds like long term it could just be problem gets bad again, we kill a bunch more elk.
It could be. That could be the strategy to take, and maybe through this damage tag program or something else.
Have they required the homeowner or the landowner to do anything to discourage the elk from coming in?
I don't think required, no. Landowners do different actions. There were some in Surf Pines I talked to who say, hey, we do X, Y, and Z, or sprays or deterrents, so you want to make sure people aren't feeding elk, things like that. But when it comes to private property, there's no requirements like that, and you see the damage tag program then come into play.
Well, it's interesting because I was thinking of Eastern Oregon and the wolves, and out there the ranchers have to do all sorts of things to discourage the wolves and keep them away from their cattle before they can actually take lethal action. And so it's interesting that on the coast there's none of that. Have they thought about tranquilizing them and shipping them out, or maybe even bringing in wolves?
Well, I think you'd probably, if you were to suggest that, you'd probably get just as much backlash as you have, as we've seen in this story, to the damage tag and the killing off of these elk, being that people there have this connection that they talk about really enjoying having the elk in the community. You have people saying, hey, the elk were here long before we were. Why would we move them out of here? Plus, they're kind of migratory animals, right? They're moving around, so where would you move them to? Is that causing another problem? So it's this very complicated issue with maybe a lack of a clear-cut solution, or at least a lack of a consensus solution that everyone be on board with.
Yeah, it's a fascinating story. I'm really conflicted, I feel, for both sides on this. Sure. Thank you, Evan. Appreciate it. Great stuff. And now it's your turn. What's going through your mind? Do you think the program should operate as is, or are changes needed? Email us, will you? The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail. The number is 503-226-5090. Now let's move to Portland's fentanyl crisis and an update on 2 downtown spots where bottle returns were paused. That was an effort to slow criminal activity that surrounded the turning in of bottles and cans for the deposit money. Well, this is a spot that I often go by, and as Blair Best reports, it appears the problem has really just shifted a few blocks away.
It's 10 o'clock on a rainy Thursday morning, and the sidewalks around Plaid Pantry on Southwest Jefferson Street and 11th Avenue are clear of people. That is, for right now.
We've been in business for 60 years. This used to be one of our flagship stores, and now I can't even keep it safely open.
That's Jonathan Polanski, the CEO of Plaid Pantry, a popular convenience store accepting individual bottle returns. The location, known to attract homeless people and drug use. Sue Perry has watched it for years.
It's always bad. It's gotten worse since the longer I've lived here.
We have people who, fear for their personal safety and end up quitting.
Earlier this month, the task force behind Portland's 90-day fentanyl state of emergency paused bottle return services at this Plaid Pantry and the neighboring Safeway to cut down on bottle money being used for drugs. A Safeway spokesperson told KGW it's resulted in a significant downturn in criminal activity there. Those at Plaid Pantry see it differently.
The issue has just moved 6 blocks away. So now I've got 2 other stores that the volume for bottles and cans that was out of this location have simply moved to those locations, and all the negative things along with it.
Like to this Plaid Pantry 4 blocks away by PSU, and even this one on Southwest 1st Avenue and Lincoln Street.
It's gotten worse. More people.
Jerry Taylor's barbershop window is right next door.
Oh yeah, they're doing it right out in the street. They're tinfoil, smoking. It's a huge problem.
How does it solve the problem? What is it going to do?
Philip sits outside the Plaid Pantry by the barbershop. His fentanyl addiction depends on can money. So them stopping bottle return services, that's not going to change your habits?
No, not at all. I mean, we'll figure out how to get around. I'll figure out how to navigate around anything that stops me from surviving. If they stop me from doing that, I won't be able to live. They're going to have to give me a hospital room.
We can't just keep moving and pushing the problem from block to block to block. There needs to be a real solution.
I get very angry about it. I think we're wasting our money and time on them and not spending the money and time where we should.
American is free. Why do you, if I want to be a drug addict, why can't I choose to be a drug addict and homeless and collect cans and turn them in for money to buy drugs with? If that's what I'm going to do with it, why can't I do that?
So again, that ban on bottle return services at those 2 downtown Portland locations was only for 30 days, and it's set to end on Monday. I also want to point out that the head of Plaid Pantry says he has not once been contacted by the task force behind the fentanyl state of emergency about any of this, but he says he does support that ban being extended. But what he really wants to see is Plaid Pantry only accept bottles during the day instead of 24/7. And he says if that doesn't work, he's even considering closing the Jefferson Street location once its lease is up in 4 years. Blair Best, KGW News.
Thank you, Blair. Now let's get to some of your thoughts on Blair's one-on-one interview with Portland Commissioner Renee Gonzalez that we aired last night. She's sitting down with each candidate for mayor to ask them about their strategy when it comes to our homeless crisis. Gonzalez talked a lot about the city's relationship with the county, especially when it comes to the Joint Office of Homeless Services. He said he would stop sending city money to that office, it's about $35 million a year, if the Joint Office continues what he calls enabling behaviors for the homeless. As far as your impressions of Gonzalez, many agree with a viewer named Rick who wrote in to say, outstanding. He gets all my support. Time to stop the enablers. Stop Portland and you will save lives.
I really hope that he is the next mayor of Portland. He has a rational approach to dealing with the homeless situation. It's not so much a homeless crisis as it is a political incompetence crisis. So many of the folks on the streets of Portland, there's no expectations of them. When they move into a neighborhood, they turn it into a landfill around their derelict vehicles and tents. It's a tough situation, but I think Commissioner Gonzalez has had the most rational approach and thought processes talking about it.
Greg wrote in to let us know he is spot on. The state, county, city, and nonprofits have for decades enabled behaviors that negatively impact the livability of our city. In a nutshell, they have failed their clients and failed those who live or play in Portland. One can be caring for persons who need and want assistance. However, the individual must do their part. But a viewer named Beth feels differently. She wrote in to say, "I'm with the folks who notice that Gonzalez lacks compassion. His duplicitous diddling around with trying to get rid of Portland street response is all the proof I need. He doesn't comprehend the disease of addiction, the problem with forcing people into mass shelters, or how Housing First could work. We don't need a tough guy as a mayor. Not impressed with that routine." Well, if you missed our segment last night, that's a bummer because it was really good. And you can find it right now on the KGW YouTube page. Maybe wait till this broadcast is over. But be sure to tune in to next week on The Story for Blair's sit-down interview with Commissioner Carmen Rubio, how she would handle the homeless crisis if elected Portland mayor in November. We talk about the public defender crisis here in Oregon quite a bit. Basically, there's a huge shortage. Some people are released from jail simply because there's not an attorney available to represent them. And the public defenders we do have are facing a mountain of cases that many say is just not feasible. But this is not just an Oregon problem. Across the Columbia in Washington, the State Bar Association has approved a plan to lighten the caseloads of overworked public defenders. It still requires approval from the state Supreme Court, but many counties worry the new plan would crush their budgets. Eric Wilkinson from our sister station in Seattle explains.
It's commonplace for public defenders here to work 80, 90, even 100 cases at a time. Many feel that workload simply isn't sustainable, so there is a movement now to cut it. However, some fear that may prove very expensive and perhaps not even possible.
We have submitted both an order setting new days as well as a contact order.
Jane Bowman has been a public defender for 12 years. Right now, she's handling about 75 cases all at once. That's low compared to what she's had to handle in the past. It's a constant struggle to keep up with it all.
Because you're kind of treading water and putting out fires all the time.
Whatcom County currently employs 27 public defenders. They're assigned to people who can't afford an attorney on their own and paid for by the government. The Constitution guarantees that everyone has the right to be represented by an attorney regardless of their ability to pay. But right now, there are simply too many cases and not enough lawyers. Long hours and heavy workloads have depleted the ranks of public defenders, even the most dedicated like Bowman.
I think I cope well, but I've gone through periods where I question whether it's the right thing for me. I really love it, but it's hard.
Standards for indigent defense and caseload limits.
A proposal by the State Bar Association would cut caseloads by 70% over the next 3 years. The problem is there will still be the same number of cases. County officials across the state believe they'll have to double or even triple their number of public defenders, and there's no plan for how to pay for them. The state only pays 3% of public defender costs. Franklin County Administrator Mike Gonzalez warns this could be what bankrupts smaller counties like ours, and the system is on the verge of collapse. In Whatcom County alone, it would cost an additional $14 million a year.
Presently, it would have to come out of the general fund, Whatcom County, and I don't believe that that's going to happen, and I can't believe that that's going to happen across the state in 39 counties.
So a big problem all around the Northwest. Again, the Washington Supreme Court has the final say on whether or not the plan is enacted, and there's no timeline for when that decision will be made. But let's dive a little deeper on the proposal, as we often do here on The Story. If approved, it would be phased in over 2 years starting in July of 2025. Now, that approach is meant to give local governments time to plan. And here's a look at how the public defender caseloads would change compared to what's going on now. The darker blue now, around 400 misdemeanor cases a year and 150 felony cases. If the new proposal is approved, those would shrink down to 120 misdemeanors a year with less than 50 felony cases. The plan does go a bit deeper than that with lower maximums for certain case types. For example, a public defender working only murder cases would be capped at 7 cases per year. So what do you think about this plan in Washington? Is it something that you think Oregon should consider? Or do you think it would be too much for some local governments, especially in rural areas? Let us know what you're thinking, will you? You should send us an email. You could and you should send us an email. The address is thestory@kgw.com, or call and leave a voicemail, 503-226-5090. Now, let's talk about Oregon's new online unemployment filing system. People have been calling and emailing us all month about headaches, long wait times, little to no help from the state. The list goes on and on and on. The new system was supposed to be better, of course, but so far it's stumbled to get out of the gate. Catherine Cook has our story.
Gustav Worth is tired of this song.
Yeah, this is awful.
He's been listening to it all day, nearly every day, for weeks now.
It's headache-inducing around hour 3, I'd say.
Gustav says the real headache has been trying to get unemployment benefits through the state of Oregon. He was laid off in late February. He filed for unemployment benefits using the state's new system called Francis Online. It launched March 4th. In a press release, Governor Kotek said it would, quote, modernize customer service for Oregonians filing for unemployment insurance benefits. Gustav begs to differ.
It's just a debacle.
He says it started with the online system requiring him to enter a one-time verification code. The state was supposed to send it to him in the mail, but it never arrived. Since then, Gustav says he's been jumping through hoops and waiting hours on hold, hoping someone would help him access the now 4 weeks of unemployment he's filed for.
I'm basically burning through my savings, and now I'm about to ask my friend who lives with us if he can help out, and that's just not what we signed up to do here.
Daniel Wallace feels his pain.
And so I've been trying to get any kind of response from them, and I just haven't been able to get many answers.
He filed for unemployment February 11th. He met with workforce officials in person and provided proof of ID. They told him everything looked good, but because they were transitioning to Francis Online, he too would need that one-time verification code. Unlike Gustav, Daniel did get his code in the mail on March 13th. He needed it by March 11th.
So the pen was already expired. And then 2 days later, I ended up getting a notice saying I've been denied benefits. So I've been trying to appeal that, but I've done everything correctly.
Surely a call to the unemployment office would fix the issue, right? Guess what song Daniel's been listening to as well? If he gets that far.
I've called him about 1,200 times. I've been able to get through about 4 times, and each time I do get through, it's about a wait time of about 4 hours.
We reached out to Oregon's employment department. A spokesperson said they're updating their letter sending process to make sure everyone has enough time to respond. As for call wait times, they said those were high even before the new system, and they understand the frustration, adding, "We appreciate our customers' patience and understanding." For Gustav, the wait and the music continue.
Right now, I am up to 4 hours and 23 minutes.
Kind of feels like a full-time job without the pay.
Catherine Cook, KGW News.
That's amazing. Come on, folks. We got to do better than that. Employment office officials shared a couple of tips which they hope will help people navigate the system. For those with a Francis Online account, they suggest sending them a message through the system. For those without accounts, they say try using the Contact Us form at francis.oregon.gov. A federal judge in Medford sides with a church in Brookings over its long-running dispute with the city. The city tried to limit the number of days the church could feed the homeless, so the church sued, arguing the practice is how they express their religion. This all started after neighbor complaints about the homeless gathering in their residential neighborhood around St. Timothy Episcopal Church. The United States Justice Department even got involved not long ago, issuing a statement of interest on behalf of the church, asking the judge to rule in St. Timothy's favor. And that is exactly what the judge, Mark D. Clark, did. With some scathing words, and we think you ought to know about it, in his ruling that the city of Brookings should consider itself fortunate, quote, to have Reverend Lindley and the entire congregation of St. Timothy as compassionate, caring, and committed members of the community. He went on, the homeless are not vagrants, but are citizens in need. This is a time for collaboration, not ill-conceived ordinances that restrict care and resources for vulnerable people in our communities. The Reverend said the church just wants to help people get back on their feet. The Washington Department of Ecology is telling the state to prepare for a drier than normal year. The warning comes as a new report reveals how similar conditions last year affected everyday people through things like fishing, agriculture, even drinking water. Erica Zucco from our Environment Northwest team explains.
Obstacles to irrigation, challenges to producing hydropower.
less hay, apples, and vegetables, and requests to limit how much water households use. That's what the newly released Pacific Northwest Water Year report shows Washington state faced after snowpack took a hit and rainfall didn't catch up.
We saw much above normal temperatures in May of 2023. We saw a lot of rapid melt of our snowpack.
Regionally, the picture was a little different. Southern Idaho and eastern Oregon got a boost to reservoirs during Tropical Storm Hillary, bringing relief to at least some of the Pacific Northwest.
Was actually finally some relief for that region because in previous water years they had seen more of the drought impacts.
At a glance, Washington had its 23rd warmest and 20th driest year on record in 2023. Oregon had its 40th driest, Idaho its 58th. Researchers like Karen Bambaco hope doing a yearly impacts assessment will help agencies plan for how to handle water in future years.
What does, the lack of snowpack mean for drinking water or for fisheries, etc.?
To prepare the report, partners across the Northwest surveyed agencies and found 50% have made changes to their long-term operations in response to trends in seasonal conditions.
We know our climate is changing, and this can help us be better prepared and plan for future impacts.
Erica Zucco, Environment Northwest.
Well, this is the last week of the KGW Great Food Drive. Help us finish strong, will you? We're close to collecting enough donations to provide 1.5 million meals to local families in need. And you can help by giving online at kgw.com/food drive. We also want to thank Rivermark Credit Union, Pacific Office Automation, Safeway, and local Toyota dealers for helping us make this year's drive a huge success. Well, that's the end of our show. No commercials. How about that? Thanks for watching. Remember the story, our collective story that never ends. It just goes on and on. The good stuff is coming your way next. Tomorrow night, we'll be talking about graffiti on Oregon and Washington interstates, what ODOT has to say about it, and the novel new way that it's being dealt with in Washington state. That's coming up tomorrow night at 6:30. In the meantime, good night.